Captain James Holloway was not a man who liked to be woken up early. Or late. Or, frankly, any time that wasn't exactly when he had decided it was time. Which, according to him, was a perfectly logical stance. Unfortunately for him, the universe didn't share his sentiments. Captain Holloway, the disembodied voice of the ship's AI, crackled through the intercom, "You are requested in the briefing room." Holloway blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of his quarters. The ship hummed steadily around him, a mechanical lullaby. He groaned. "I don't need a briefing," he muttered to no one in particular. "I've been briefed 1,000 times. I know the drill." Of course, it wasn't that simple. Not when he had a crew of 10 highly trained soldiers, half a dozen overzealous academics, and one particularly nervous AI who had no idea what it was doing. Holloway's boots hit the floor with a heavy thud, the ship's low gravity giving him an odd, floaty feeling as he made his way to the briefing room. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing the usual scene, a group of serious faces, every single one of them more composed than Holloway could ever hope to be. The scholars, with their beady eyes and furrowed brows, were gathered around the table. Dr. Allison Green, the mission's lead archaeologist, was scribbling something furiously on her tablet. To her left, Dr. Theo Rodriguez, a historian who specialized in ancient intergalactic civilizations, was giving Holloway an exasperated look. "Captain Holloway," Green said, barely glancing up, "I trust you are fully prepared for the briefing?" "I'm prepared to sit down and let you all talk for the next hour about how you'll be the ones figuring out how to save the galaxy," Holloway said with a grin. "As usual." Green didn't smile. "I would prefer it if you'd take this seriously. We are about to enter a system that's been abandoned for centuries. This could be our one chance to uncover the Guardians' secrets." "Right. The Guardians," Holloway said, rolling his eyes. "Because what could possibly go wrong with uncovering the secrets of an ancient civilization that blew up half the galaxy?" Green shot him a look that could melt titanium. "I'm serious, Captain." "Relax, I'm serious too," Holloway said. "I just don't believe everything I hear about legends. Sure, the Guardians were great. Until they weren't." He dropped into his seat at the head of the table. "So, what exactly is it we're uncovering here?" Rodriguez, who had been fiddling with his tablet, stood up and adjusted his glasses. "We're headed to the planet Scifiaudiobooks. It's located in a star system that was wiped out after the Guardians fell. No one has dared enter the system for thousands of years, and for good reason. But recent scans suggest that there may be a vault buried beneath the planet's surface." "A vault full of what?" Holloway asked. "A vault containing technology," Green answered, "and possibly the key to restoring the balance of power in the galaxy. The Guardians were one of the most advanced species to ever exist. Their downfall could provide us with the information we need to prevent another war. To rebuild what's been lost." Holloway stared at her, then glanced over at the soldiers standing silently by the door. Sergeant Miller, a burly, stoic man, gave Holloway a silent nod. The captain sighed. "I suppose you'll want me to guard you while you dig through dusty old ruins and try to figure out why these Guardians blew up the universe." Green didn't even flinch. "Exactly. And we'll need your expertise. We're heading into unknown territory. There are traps, security measures, and God knows what else. We'll need to be ready for anything." "Well, isn't that why they pay me the big bucks?" Holloway muttered. Green raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, she shifted the display on the holodeck, showing a map of the Scifiaudiobooks system. The planet, dark and cold, orbited a dying star, and on the display, Holloway could see the faint outline of the vault, buried deep beneath the planet's crust. "From the scans, it's clear that the Guardians left something important behind," Rodriguez said. "But there's also something else. The vault isn't just an archive or storage facility. It looks more like a weapon." "A weapon?" Holloway leaned forward, suddenly more interested. "What kind of weapon?" A doomsday weapon, Green said. A weapon capable of wiping out entire systems. Well, that sounds promising, Holloway deadpanned. Should we go in there and press the big red button marked Destruction of All Life in the Galaxy? Rodriguez gave him a look of disapproval. This isn't a joke, Captain. If we can understand the technology, we might be able to reverse engineer it. Think of what we could do for the galaxy, what we could do for Earth. Holloway rubbed his face. All right. So we go in, we find the ancient weapon, and we don't blow up the galaxy. Simple enough. He stood up and clapped his hands together. Let's get moving then. I've got a good feeling about this. Let's go see what kind of mess we've stepped into. The crew exchanged glances, the air thick with tension. But Holloway's casual demeanor was a comfort to the soldiers, even if it did little to reassure the scholars. The ship, Vanguard, broke through the outer atmosphere of Sirius and into the darkened orbit of the dying star. The planet's surface was a desolate wasteland of blackened rock and deep ravines, evidence of the catastrophe that had once befallen the system. As the ship descended toward the surface, the crew could only wonder what secrets lay hidden beneath the barren land that it didn't take long for them to locate the entrance to the vault. It was a massive structure, carved into the heart of a cliff face, its architecture both alien and beautiful, angular, geometric shapes interwoven with energy patterns that pulsed with an eerie glow. Holloway stood at the base of the vault, eyeing it with suspicion. All right, Holloway muttered, let's see what the Guardians left behind. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. The team moved cautiously, their lights flickering off the reflective surfaces of strange, unknown materials. Holloway led the way, the soldiers flanking him while the scholars marveled at the wall's intricate designs. This is it, Green whispered. This is it. Yeah, I'm starting to get that feeling, Holloway muttered. And I'm not sure it's the good kind of feeling. They pressed on, deeper into the heart of the vault, where a massive, circular chamber lay ahead. At the center was a pedestal, and on it rested an object covered in a crystalline shell. Holloway's eyes narrowed as he approached it, sensing something wrong in the pit of his stomach. What is that? He asked, voice tight. Rodriguez stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's a map. A star map. Green took a tentative step toward the pedestal, her fingers brushing the surface of the object. She gasped. It's more than just a map, she said. It's a key. A key to something much bigger. Holloway's heart sank. And I'm guessing it's not something we want to open. Green's face was pale. I'm afraid you're right, Captain. This isn't a map to save the galaxy. It's a map to destroy it. The room grew colder as Green's words settled in, the weight of their meaning sinking in. Holloway's jaw clenched, and he stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the star map that seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible light. The object on the pedestal shimmered, like it was alive, as if waiting for someone to make the wrong choice. So, let me get this straight, Holloway said, his voice low. This thing isn't going to guide us to some ancient treasure. It's going to lead us to a weapon that could end the galaxy. That's exactly what it is, Green said, her voice trembling slightly. This is a weapon unlike anything we've ever seen. The Guardians didn't create this to preserve peace, they created it to ensure their dominance. It was a contingency plan, a way to wipe out anyone who could threaten them. Rodriguez was silent for a moment, staring at the map in stunned disbelief. But why leave it here? Why not destroy it? Why leave something this dangerous behind? Maybe they knew, Holloway said, his voice dark. Maybe they knew that the next species would be just as stupid as they were. Maybe they wanted it to fall into the wrong hands. Green swallowed hard, taking a step back from the pedestal. We can't let this out of here. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. If this thing is activated, it will trigger the last of the Guardians' war machines. It's not just a weapon, it's a system designed to eliminate all galactic life and reset the cycle. The soldiers behind Holloway shifted uncomfortably, the gravity of the situation weighing on them. Holloway's gut tightened. He knew what they were thinking, the same thing he was thinking. They weren't here to make history. They weren't here to restore anything. They were just a bunch of expendable pawns in someone else's grand game. Well, Holloway muttered, there goes any chance of us getting back to Earth in one piece. What do we do? Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the tension. Do we destroy it? Is that even possible? I don't know yet, Holloway answered, eyes still fixed on the map. But I do know this. If we leave here and this thing gets into the wrong hands, then we'll never make it back to Earth. Hell, there won't be a galaxy left to go back to. Green stepped closer, her face pale but determined. We have to destroy it. There's no other option. If we don't, Holloway's hand shot up, stopping her mid-sentence. I get it, he said. We destroy it. But how? Do we just throw it into space? Drop it into a black hole? What if it's more than just a map? What if it's a key to something much bigger? Bigger? Rodriguez said. What could be bigger than a weapon that could obliterate entire systems? Holloway glanced over at him. Something even more dangerous. This could be the only thing that can stop the war machines. We don't know what it's linked to. There could be something else in this vault we're missing. Green nodded slowly, though she clearly didn't want to acknowledge Holloway's point. You're right. We don't know. But we can't take any chances. We have to stop it. Holloway turned to Miller, who was watching him with a hard, unreadable expression. Miller, get the explosives. Let's blow this thing up. Miller nodded without a word, his face set in grim determination. He turned to head toward the back of the room where their equipment was stashed. Meanwhile, Holloway stayed focused on the star map. There was something about it, a subtle hum that was more than just a reflection of the light, more than the simple energy of the room. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive in some way, that it was aware of them, waiting for them to make a move. Hold up, he said, raising a hand. Before we go blowing things up, I want to take a closer look at this. Green stepped forward, eyes narrowing in confusion. Captain, we don't have time. I know, Holloway interrupted, his tone firm. I'm not saying we don't destroy it. I'm saying we need to understand what the hell we're dealing with first. We're not just going to hit it with a hammer and hope for the best. Rodriguez joined him, both men standing over the pedestal. Green lingered behind them, clearly impatient, but still too wary to question Holloway's judgment completely. Holloway leaned closer to the map. There were patterns, too precise to be random, too intricate to be simply a map. It was like a puzzle, a message encoded in the stars. The lights on the pedestal seemed to shift, revealing hidden compartments that Holloway hadn't noticed before. Captain, Green said, her voice tight, we're wasting time. Give me a minute, Holloway snapped. You wanted answers, didn't you? I'm trying to get them. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface of the pedestal, tracing the faint lines that seemed to be glowing in response to his touch. Slowly, something changed. The map shifted, rearranging itself into new patterns. Holloway could hear a soft click, like a hidden mechanism had just engaged. What the hell? Holloway muttered. The map began to project a holographic display, a three-dimensional image of the galaxy, spinning slowly in midair. Holloway stepped back in awe as the map zoomed in on the Sci-Fi system, highlighting key points within the galaxy. What is this? Green whispered, stepping forward. It's a map to every major conflict in the galaxy, every point where civilizations fell. Every one of them, Holloway said grimly, watching as the stars blinked out one by one. It wasn't just showing history, it was showing the death of entire species, the collapse of civilizations, the quiet aftermath of war. The map was a record of destruction, but then, something else caught his eye. One point on the map was different. It wasn't just a point of destruction. It was a point of energy. A pulsating, red glow surrounded it, radiating outward like a wound on the galaxy itself. "That's it," Holloway said. "That's where it starts." Rodriguez leaned in, eyes wide with disbelief. "The heart of the war machines. The core." Green's hand was trembling as she pointed at the projection. "That's where they activated the weapon. That's where it all began." "Exactly," Holloway said, a chill running through him. "And if we don't stop it here, it'll start again. The war machines will wake up, and they'll finish what they started. Then we have to destroy it," Green said firmly. Holloway nodded. "No argument from me. Let's make sure it doesn't come back." As Miller returned with the explosives, Holloway felt the weight of their situation bearing down on him. The Guardians had created this weapon to prevent their own extinction, but now it was their legacy to keep it from awakening. No one was ever meant to return from this place. Holloway knew that. The stars above them seemed to whisper the truth. They weren't here to restore the galaxy. They were here to end it. The hum of the explosives vibrated through the chamber, an unsettling sound that made the walls seem to close in around them. Holloway stood at the pedestal, watching the map's projection flicker in and out of focus, the red pulse growing stronger by the second. It was as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to make their move. Miller approached, carrying a heavy satchel of explosives, his expression grim. He looked at the pedestal with a sort of reverence, as if even he knew how dangerous it was to touch something this ancient, this powerful. "Ready, Captain," Miller said quietly, placing the satchel on the ground next to Holloway. Holloway nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the map. He could feel the weight of the moment, the finality of it. There was no turning back now. Once they set the charges, the weapon would be gone, and so would they. No one would ever know the true extent of what they'd uncovered. No one would ever understand what the Guardians had left behind. He reached for the detonator, his fingers hovering just above it. He had known for a long time that this moment was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. The sense of inevitability hung over him like a cloud. "Are you sure about this?" Green's voice cut through the silence, and Holloway turned to face her. Her eyes were filled with a mix of fear and determination, her voice shaking slightly, but it was clear she wasn't asking for herself, she was asking for the galaxy. "For all of them, I'm sure," Holloway said, his voice steady. "We have no other choice." Green looked at the pedestal, her eyes lingering on the map. "But what if we're wrong? What if we're destroying something that could save everything?" Holloway shook his head slowly. The Guardians weren't trying to save anything. They were trying to control it. "If we leave this thing here, it'll never stop. The war machines will wake up, and they'll do what they were built to do. There's no saving this. Not anymore." Green's lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but the look in Holloway's eyes silenced her. She knew he was right. They were standing at the edge of something beyond their control, and the only way out was to destroy it. To burn the legacy of a civilization that had failed so utterly that it had created something capable of wiping out all the life in the galaxy. "Let's do it," she whispered, stepping back. Holloway exhaled, his fingers closing around the detonator. The countdown began, slow, steady, as if the universe itself was giving them one last chance to reconsider. But there was no hesitation in Holloway's movements. He pressed the button. The explosion was deafening. For a moment, everything went black. The world seemed to tilt, the ground beneath them shaking violently as the shockwave rippled through the vault. Holloway's ears rang, and he stumbled backward, his vision swimming. He gritted his teeth, trying to regain his bearings. Then, the silence came. The kind of silence that only happens after something truly catastrophic. The hum of the vault systems faded, and for the first time, Holloway could hear the faint, distant sound of the wind outside, the planet's barren landscape eerily quiet, the pedestal, the star map, and the weapon. They were all gone. Holloway took a deep breath, slowly coming to his senses. He looked around at the team, all of them standing in stunned silence, their faces pale in the dim light. "Did we do it?" Miller asked, his voice rough. Holloway didn't answer at first. He could still feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air, could still hear the faintest echo of the red pulse from the map, though it was now silent. Still, there was no way to know for sure if they had truly stopped it. The Guardians had been smarter than they had given them credit for. Maybe they'd missed something, maybe they'd triggered something else, but Holloway wasn't going to let that happen. Not while he was still breathing. "I think so," he said, his voice low. "But it doesn't matter now." "Captain," Green said, her voice sharp. She was standing near the edge of the room, staring at the now empty pedestal. "You don't think." "I don't think anything," Holloway interrupted. "I know that whatever we did, it's over now. We've stopped it from coming back. The galaxy is safe. For now." Green was silent for a long time, her eyes flicking between Holloway and the remains of the pedestal. Then, finally, she nodded. "I suppose you're right. We've done what we came here to do." The weight of those words settled heavily in the air, and Holloway felt a pang of regret deep in his chest. It wasn't relief that he felt, it was something else. Something darker. They had just ended a part of history, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. "Not really." Holloway turned to the rest of the crew. "All right, let's get back to the ship. We've done enough here." There was a brief pause, and then Miller nodded, signaling to the others to start moving. Holloway followed them, his mind racing, his heart heavy. They had destroyed the weapon, but what if they had only put an end to one chapter of the galaxy's endless cycle of destruction? What if the Guardians weren't the first, but the last? Was humanity doomed to repeat the same mistakes? They reached the entrance of the vault, and as Holloway stepped out into the dim light of the planet's surface, a shiver ran down his spine. The stars above him were distant, cold pinpricks of light in a vast, empty sky. He glanced back at the vault one last time, the thought of the secrets buried within its walls still haunting him. There was no going back now. There was no undoing what they had done. As they boarded the ship, Holloway felt the weight of the mission finally settle on him. The crew was silent as the Vanguard lifted off the surface of Scifius and made its way back toward the stars. "We did it," Miller said quietly as they broke through the planet's atmosphere. "Yeah," Holloway muttered, his gaze fixed on the dark expanse ahead. "We did. But I wonder if it was worth it." The ship's engines hummed steadily, and Holloway stared out into the void of space. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his crew or the mission. He was thinking about what they had destroyed. About the legacy of the Guardians. About the possibility that no matter what they did, they would always be a part of the cycle. A cycle that would never end. A cycle of war, death, and rebirth. The galaxy was vast, and the stars held secrets that no one had yet to uncover. Holloway wondered if they had truly stopped the worst of it, or if they had merely delayed the inevitable. The ship pushed on through the blackness of space, the silence of the unknown pressing in on them, and Holloway knew one thing: they would never be able to escape the consequences of their actions. No one ever did.